starting with the EU. Then Germany is floating conscription if volunteer plans fail.
Oh man.
So basically, Germany is considering the reintroduction of compulsory military service if its current voluntary recruitment strategy fails to meet defense needs. And Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has indicated that while the initial approach focuses on voluntary enlistment, mandatory conscription could be implemented if recruitment targets are not achieved. The government aims to have a new military service law in effect by January 2026. So that will be soon. That's right after Christmas. What does this really say? We've heard, obviously, a lot about the younger generation being anxious and concerned about not wanting to be drafted into the military. This is across the board in the West, from the United States to even in Europe. And as you know, with the buildup of more militarization, especially right now in Europe, and these wars exploding all around and conflicts, there's been a lot of protests and a lot of people who are kind of against that. We had a video, I think, on the previous article. I'm not sure if it can play back. Should we try that?
Which one? On The Economist? For some reason, I can't play it.
Oh, okay, then never mind. We have, but basically, okay, if we can't play it, then it's no problem.
Yeah.
Well, the question is the spirit of militarism, especially in Germany and also beyond Germany, whether there is a desire to fight. And it just looks like more of the younger generation and most people, even people from our generation, are kind of worn out with fighting and with war. And so I don't really see this being the right path ahead.
Yeah, I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it.
The context and the rationale for this is obviously the push for, reintroducing the conscription, arising from concerns of national defense readiness and evolving security threats in Europe, particularly following, obviously, since 2022, the full-scale conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So Germany suspended its draft in 2011, but has struggled to meet troop targets as defense demands grow. The current military service plan includes efforts to reactivate more reservists to enhance defense capabilities. So that would mean people who previously have training and that are kind of on the list.
Yeah.
And despite the proposal, there are significant challenges. The Bundeswehr, which is the armed forces of Germany, currently lacks the infrastructure to accommodate a large influx of conscripts. There are insufficient barracks, training facilities, and personnel to support this rapid expansion. Additionally, integrating conscriptions would require constitutional amendments. That's a big thing, which would include women, as the current law mandates conscription is only for men. So equal rights there are necessary.
Seems like they want everybody on board. That's not good. It's like Israel, right, where they have like women in the army.
Indeed.
Well. They just want more people.
Yeah. The debate over reinstating conscription has intensified amid growing concerns about national defense readiness, as mentioned, and security threats in Europe. The Conservative Christian Democratic Union, CDU, and Christian Social Union, the CSU, who usually align with one another, have advocated for reintroducing compulsory military service. While the center-left Social Democrats, or SPD, favor voluntary service, which it has been since 2011, the coalition agreement between these parties outlines plans for a new voluntary military service to rebuild the overstretched and steadily shrinking ranks of Germany's armed forces, especially now in light of Chancellor Merz in talks with Prime Minister Starmer and, of course, President Macron, who are big proponents of, alongside President Ursula von der Leyen, in establishing a new EU defense plan for the European states. Now, we have obviously public opinion on the compulsory service, which is mixed, highlighting the tensions, as mentioned before, between this ultra superstate nationalism and military identity. There was a Forces survey that revealed that only 17% of Germans would be willing to take up arms to defend their country. Now,
Yeah.
again, this is in light of what I mentioned, that the newer generation, including ours, are kind of having grown up in a lot of conflicts and wars, especially, in view of what we know about the military industrial complex and about, corporations and all about the arms trade and all these things.
Yeah.
No one is really that eager. So it's not surprising only 17. I mean, 17% is still pretty intriguing. But they would only take up arms to defend their country in the event of a military attack. So that's shocking, just so you know. In contrast, a study by the French Ministry of Defense found that 51% of 18 to 25-year-olds would be prepared to fight in Ukraine if necessary to defend France, which is interesting, to say the least. I don't see how that affects France, but yeah, there has been for a long time a large, significant interest of France within the Ukrainian conflict, especially from the Ukrainian side. Germany's consideration of reintroducing this conscription reflects a strategic response to evolving its security challenges. However, the success of this initiative will depend on overcoming significant logistical, political, and societal hurdles. I think particularly those are the main ones, the societal hurdles. And the government's ability to balance defense needs with public sentiment and constitutional constraints will be crucial in shaping the future of Germany's military service model. I think that this is Germany's possible return to conscription, which is a significant step in its bolstering European defense capabilities and EU strategic autonomy. However, this raises the stakes in the current EU-Russia relations too, which requires some careful management to avoid unintended escalation. And at this current time, I guess we have to see also on the international stage, especially with what's going on with the NATO summit, which we'll talk about. But it does seem currently that there has been a lot more bolstering of this militarization from the EU, especially EU countries like France, the UK, and Germany in particular, and it's mostly been in targeting Russia, obviously, which I don't know if it's really in. Where was that? Right interest.
It's the video that we're going to show Germany afterwards. On the Shall I show it?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Urge of bringing back compulsory military service. In a recent interview, Germany's defense minister, Boris Pistorius, said the government may have no choice but to bring back mandatory conscription if Germany's new military volunteer scheme fails to meet recruitment goals.
By the way, this video is from TLDR News, and they use a lot of sources from Ground News.
Yeah.
Which is a good site for news.
And it's not just talk. A new bill is in the works, which may be ready by January 2026. So in this video, we're going to have a look at Germany's voluntary military service scheme, why it probably won't work, and whether this might force the return of mandatory conscription.
It would be interesting to know what they present as why it wouldn't work, although there could be, I can imagine already that the main reason is that they're already facing a lot of financial burden and obviously the societal pressure.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to show this graph, this chart. Basically, it shows all the different countries in the European region and what years they ended their mandatory conscription.
Oh, right.
For example, in the UK, it was around 1960. Luxembourg before 1970. Most other countries were mid 90s to mid 2000s.
That's wild. So this is the countries that have abolished conscription.
Yes. So if you think about it, between 20 and 30 years ago, most countries abolished it. And they probably did so for money reasons. Like, if you're not in a war, why would you force people to train? I think it should be like,
Yeah,
people should do it by choice and do it properly.
voluntary. Yeah, but it looks like here does it show Luxembourg because I believe they never had conscription, right? Luxembourg.
Well, apparently they did.
Okay,
This
well,
shows they
the
did.
data is different, I guess.
Okay.
No, I'm going by what we got here as well in our docket, where it shows countries, EU countries of active military conscription, which there are certain countries still that do active conscription. You have actually experienced somewhat with this because you actually did training, didn't you?
Yes, absolutely. Like, I've been in the army and have experienced the thick of it. And, well, personally, like, my own opinion is that you should have people to volunteer instead of just get anyone to do it. I think you want to do it, and also these people should be trained like to the max, and also reward them well for it as well. Like, not just let everybody like in, like people who can't, or like they need to like pick people. Like, if you get, for example, like mercenaries in countries that are off the grid or doing all these like special missions that aren't even like from government sometimes, these people are properly trained. These are like hired killer hitman type, like for special missions, to go in, to go out. They're not anyone. They're not like any 18-year-old or any 60-year-old. These guys are,
well, they experienced, right? They already,
yeah.
But I think that's the plan, is that they want to build up a new, armed
I think
force.
maybe by numbers. I think it's what everybody's like afraid of, like regarding China, for example, because they just have like such a big population.
Right.
And that's also, I think, why the Indian military is also very big. And
they're building up too. But I think it's going to take a while, because if you know history, then you see that like in World War I, this was like a bunch of kids and also elderly people were fighting there. And it wasn't only until World War II, and then following that there was already an active military service that was slowly training people. And it's just that we haven't had the need for that since World War II, because obviously the EU was set up as a peace project. So as there would not be any need for further conflict or fighting. But now
sorry. I just wanted to say that, like we've mentioned on the past live streams, that the industrial military complex is huge, and there's a lot of companies and governments that can make, or people within the government, to make money off certain deals, like war profiteering, which is pretty concerning, because the other people are like making profits off like military equipment and jets and stuff like that, whereas we're going to be pushed like on the front lines of like war. We're just going to be like cannon fodder, and these guys are like playing around with like millions and billions of whatever currency, like euros.
Well, as we've seen, they're funneling so much more money into that, as opposed to other social and social projects or programs.
Like, instead of like healthcare and education and basic needs, like people are suffering from like they can't pay their heating bills, and here we are just like talking about like funding war, basically.
I think these are potential threats, and apparently, I don't think we probably need to watch the whole video, because we covered already a lot of what they kind of mentioned. But what's interesting is that the countries which are considering bringing back conscription are not only Germany, by the way, because their reinstatement, is, just to clarify, is only if volunteer recruitment fails. That's the plan, and that would be through a new law which was already expressed in January 2026. Sorry. And I don't know how that will go. I believe fundamentally because most Germans are probably going to like protest, because in reality the majority of there was the whole thing that after World War II, you know, Germany wasn't allowed to build up its military and all this stuff.
Yes.
And in general, the majority of Germans probably don't want anything to do with this, and they're just thinking like, what's going on now? Like, where are we headed there? Like, this is a bit
Yeah.
scary again, you know.
I think people have heard like all the stories like from their grandparents or great grandparents,
Right.
like how much they've suffered, like from all sides, like not just like the Allies, but the Axis as well. And it's like these people didn't decide by themselves to go into war.
Exactly.
And hopefully, like, I don't know, as a human race, we
and
can,
that's the thing. So I don't really see like most of the younger generation today, let alone our generation, who are very disenchanted and disillusioned with anything to
yeah.
do with war and conflict, being interested in this. Poland is considering some form of limited conscription, by the way. Not a surprise, being that it's a lot now. It's veering off a lot more towards a hard gear, conservative movement, and its limited conscription will be that of an expanded reserve training amid obviously the current tensions that they're having with Russia. And then we have Slovakia debating reinstatement and regional security concerns. Sweden reintroduced conscription, which I did not know as well. That's kind of crazy. In
Yeah.
2017, and this is due to
Wow.
security
Okay.
concerns.
I didn't know.
They're one of the few that have reintroduced it. And Finland maintains conscription and is strengthening service amid regional tensions as well. So it just looks like this is all pointing in the same direction once more. And you have northern Eastern European countries, you know, like Estonia, Latvia,
Yeah.
Lithuania, Finland, Sweden, who tend to maintain or reinstate conscription, often driven by obviously their proximity to Russia and regional security concerns. Now, that looks like it's bolstering potential escalation, unnecessarily so, perhaps, because you know, we have seen for the last couple of decades that there's been, you know, obviously no intent or interest for an invasion. Obviously, the USSR no longer exists anymore. There was a whole agreement, there was a whole procedure, a whole process. You know, this is all out of World War II as well. The whole project of the EU.
With Gorbachev and Reagan and
so again, it's interesting. I can understand wanting to have a military kind of presence for defense, etc. But
but it does seem like over the top right now when like, I don't know, people are trying to make ends meet. Like, are you serious? Like, you want to buy?
Well, that's the other thing. This is a kind of a repeat of like what people were going through, you know, at the turn of the century into World War One. Don't forget, World War One was off the back of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
So you had the Great Depression, you know.
I also like how Germany was like at the end of World War One.
Yeah, they were totally. That was part of the reason why they, you know, they turned into the country that they became, because they were completely disillusioned, you know, ruined financially.
Whereas if they were in a better state, they probably wouldn't get into war.
No, probably not. And that's kind of, you have to wonder if this is the writing on the wall, you know, writing on the wall.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, because you were just talking about housing prices and stuff. Is this all some sort of is this all, you know, some sort of indication here that this is like just fuel to like push towards the militarization process? Because
you also mentioned I just want to say, you also mentioned to me once about like a lot of countries like doing construction works and not finishing projects.
Yeah.
Like, why are they not finishing like a lot of construction works, like public ones? Like, maybe they're putting money into other things. Who knows? I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but like maybe money is like going into other projects.
Yeah, definitely is. In terms of Western Southern Europe, they largely abolished conscription, as far as I know, decades ago. But even they are now currently debating a return to, you know, due to the evolving geopolitical tensions and Germany's debate is particularly notable because, obviously, given its size and influence as one of the main, European states,
Yes. Yeah.
and this push is driven by the military readiness challenges and regional security threats. Again, we're seeing this term being thrown around a lot. It's kind of like
Yeah.
the term of democracy, which is like, the threat. What actual threat is there other than actually escalating things, provoking things to the point of, nuclear and, war, which would be actually a threat, because there has been no threat up until that point. This is it's giving me flashbacks back when I was young enough in the 80s to remember we're kind of going back, and it's kind of ironic, but it's giving me flashbacks of the whole Red Scare. So the Red Scare, as you know, was a whole movement back in the 60s, especially through McCarthyism, where everybody was a Soviet spy, everybody was a this and that and that. But this continued all the way up until the 80s, up until like the whole dissolution of the USSR. There was this idea of like, you could, I don't know if you remember any movies from the 80s too, but there was this whole idea of like, oh, there were the Soviet agents.
Oh, of course I do. There was one with
nuclear
Arnold
suitcase.
Schwarzenegger,
Right.
like with KGBs and
Exactly. And it just feels like we're reliving this in some bizarre sort of recycling.
yeah, like Cold War II or something like that.
But instead of it being the Soviets, it's it has to be it's Russia.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I am kind of tired of hearing about it all the time. It's like we've heard this since 2016, 2015.
Yeah.
We know, and that was all a bunch of hooey in the beginning, and it just continues to be the same case. It's kind of ironic that given all the other potential threatening countries and
Yeah.
or states, I should say, let's say states, who could potentially prove to be an actual threat, right? These are never mentioned, but instead, it's like our direction is always met or being shifted to Russia.
I also want to mention
I'm just
that,
worn out with already.
because before we mentioned Germany, that Germany, aside from its own military, also has companies like Heckler and Co., which produce weapons, and also a lot of countries manufacture weapons based on their blueprints sometimes.
Right.
So you get like, I don't know, an assault rifle or something, and you get other countries like getting the blueprints and
then building them
just building their own weapons, but they need
Right.
to have them like licensed or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that Germany also has like interest in like its own companies that sell weapons or blueprints to other countries as well.
I just think my final thought on this, just so we can move on, is just that I just think we were sold a lie, in my opinion, because if the EU was supposed to be a peace project to avert further conflict and stuff, I'm not really seeing that at this point in time. It just feels like it's been some sort of like project to escalate things up to a point where it becomes some sort of super national state, so to speak, right? And it's literally just going through all the procedures, like first the unitary currency, the centralized political body, and now one major defense plan, which is obviously pushing it to become a military industrial complex. And people can say like, oh, what are you talking about? But the thing is, this was mentioned multiple times and people warned about this, but this is what happens if you go down that route. And unfortunately, I just don't really, like we mentioned before, it doesn't really seem like the real people of Europe or that make up Europe, the citizens, right? The average citizens, it just seems like their interests or issues are not being met and heard.